To Survival. I'm your host, Tara Reade. This is a special show. I'm going to be coming to you from 2,100 feet, 2,100 meters, sorry. Behind me is Mount Elbrus.
Elbrus.
Elbrus, yes. I want to pronounce it correctly. And on the other side of that, you have other countries like Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. And if you look at this beautiful valley, I just spent about 5 minutes meditating and praying and actually having moments of gratitude, which is good for this. This area of the Caucasus that I've been exploring is beloved, part of Russia. And much of the cultures here, you know, there's so many different cultures. You'll see, you know, Muslim culture next to Christian culture, next to all kinds of native cultures, and all living in harmony with the land. And a lot of people living with the land and doing agricultural now things, especially after sanctions. Russia has done a great job turning inward and creating its own economy. And as you can see, with this beautiful land, why not, right? So tonight we have this, and then later in the show we have Chris Emms. Chris Emms was one of the founders of crypto, one of the OGs, if you will, who was chased by the American government, even though he's a British citizen. And he sought political asylum in Russia, like I did. And we'll talk about our experiences being chased by our own governments, although in his case, he wasn't even American, and how he is enjoying his life now. So here I am enjoying life, and I'm glad you're with me, and you get to see this beautiful piece of beauty, this beautiful valley. Very grateful to Reade for bringing me here and his friend Sergey. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Reade Baycharov. I'm from town of Kislovodsk. Very beautiful town.
It is beautiful, krasiva.
Yes, here we are with Tara. We're entering the town right now and going further. We have came to a place called Canyon, where they have horse riding, horse tours, and all kinds of activities.
Yeah.
Activities, exactly. Behind me is the ridge. It's called Burgustan. It's 57 kilometers long. Ridge goes like this all the way towards northwest.
It's beautiful.
Yes, and this area is just amazing.
Yeah, you were saying that this is called. It means it's the town of sunshine, right? Because
yeah, the town of sunshine, because we have more than 300 sunny days a year. Why does it work like that here? Because Kislovodsk is standing right under the rocky ridge, which is up ahead, and that's what, and it's surrounded by this ridge right here, Burgustan, and another one on the back is called Jinal Ridge. And these three ridges, they sort of make this protected area, and protected from the incoming clouds, from all kinds of rains and stuff like this. So nearby city is Sintuki, which is 11 kilometers away from us. For example, it can go for 1 month raining, and all this time here in Kislovodsk we have totally sunshine.
It's
the best
gorgeous
place to stay. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
And
it's
the nature,
really gorgeous. Yes, the nature. Well, here we are at a really cool horse ranch. Someone's getting a lesson, and yeah, so onward and forward.
Chris Emms, Christopher Emms, finally, like I see you, we're friends, we know each other, but this is the first time I've been able to get you on my podcast, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here on this lovely sunny day.
So I need to share with the audience just a little bit about how much you mean to me, because well, you're my best Moscow friend, let's just put it that way, but also you were so kind to me when I first came to Moscow and was on vacation and then wasn't, and then was just like, and you know, went into the political asylum, and you immediately stepped in, you made sure I had groceries, and you showed me how to get a taxi, and you showed me how to just do basic things. I was like a toddler. So thank you.
You're
and
too
thank you
kind, Tara. I'm sure you'd have got there yourself, but you're a strong person. But you know, it was a pleasure to help you out when you needed it.
And you help others too. You're a very big-hearted person. And I know the media, Western media, likes to beat me up. They like to beat you up. But I think both of us, now we've gotten to know each other very well. And seen each other in a lot of different circumstances, going through our journey. And still, what I want to say to the audience is, don't believe everything you read.
True that.
Yeah. So let's start with you. I want to hear more about you. You're now living in Moscow, and could you just talk a little bit about how you got to Moscow and what your journey was like, and and touch on that.
Wow, gosh, yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot online, but I'll give a very brief summary, and I'm sure your viewers and your listeners can. Well, I know they're a very intellectual, educated bunch, so I'm sure they'll Google and read more on it. But essentially, I've been working in the finance industry for since, what am I, 32 now, since I was about 19. And that was predominantly working with these things called cryptocurrencies. A lot of people have heard of something called Bitcoin and crypto, not in some sort of scammy way like a lot of this stuff is, but really understanding how it could be used as a payment method. So to give people sort of an overview, you've got your normal way you do a bank transfer, and you can also use cryptocurrencies to send and receive funds. It's really how most of us who have any income outside of Russia are receiving our money here, because Russia's been excluded from the global financial system, as I'm sure your viewers already know. So I went through that career, had a number of different jobs, which were quite exciting. I was a young guy. It allowed me to travel the world, stay in very nice hotels, travel business class. It was a lovely lifestyle. In 2019, I was just starting to work really for a big company called Bitcoin.com. And I'd been offered an opportunity to go and speak. I was speaking at conferences all over the world, but I was offered to go and speak at a conference in North Korea, in Pyongyang. Now, that may sound like a really bizarre thing for a British person to do. But at the time, if we go back, the vernacular of the West was very different. Donald Trump was hugging the leader on the border, and a lot of people have been talking about how there would be maybe peace there. So I thought, that might be an interesting thing to do. So the first thing I did is I contacted the British Embassy in Pyongyang, and I said, hi, am I breaking any laws if I go? I know that North Korea is North Korea. Am I breaking any laws if I go there? They replied, they said, we don't advise you to go, but it's not illegal. So I thought, okay, well, they don't advise me, but I've never been someone to really take advice. If something's a thrill-seeking adventure, I'm happy to do it as long as I'm not breaking any laws. So we went to North Korea to attend this conference. Now, when we went to North Korea, sorry, 1 second, I've just got a ping on my phone there. Just put it on silent. So sorry that. So when we went to North Korea, we went about 8 of us. Now, there was one certain gentleman that came with us, and he happened to be a US citizen, and his name was Virgil Griffith. Now, Virgil's quite a famous person. To give you his background, you can look it all up online. Some of your viewers probably already know him, but he's an incredibly talented data scientist, if you like. And he was one of the founders of the Ethereum project, which is a very big cryptocurrency project that a lot of people will be aware of. They may even own some Ethereum. It's something that a lot of people tend to invest in, especially these days. So we went there. To be honest with you, it was more or less like a holiday. It was a bit of a, if you've ever watched any of those documentaries on YouTube about visiting North Korea, it's a very, sort of an itinerary is set for you, and you basically follow the itinerary, which is where you see, the statues in North Korea. You go to the North Korean side of the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, as it's called to Americans, and you kind of had this trip. And, fairly interesting. It's what you'd expect. You don't really get to see much of the country outside of the confines of what your guides show you. And then we were asked to go and do this quote unquote conference. Now, this conference was essentially, Tara, it was, we were all put in a room. We were given pieces of paper, which had basically been translated from Google in order to speak on. This is North Korea, so you can't just go around and sort of, freestyle a speech. Everything has to be pre-approved. So we did this whole thing, completely boring. Nothing was discussed that was particularly interesting. There was definitely no crypto secrets that we were giving the North Korean attendees. It was actually so boring, Tara, that I fell asleep during it. So,
oh wow,
as did many of the attendees. So anyway, come back to the UK where I was living at the time. Thought very little of it. What a quirky thing to have done. Fast forward to September, Thanksgiving 2019. I'm at home at that point. I've moved again. I used to move around quite a lot for work. I was in Malta, and I remember I was in Malta. There was another big conference. My life used to revolve around these conferences in Malta, and I had a few friends over to have a few drinks and some food, as you do. And then suddenly someone messages me and says, "Chris, look at your phone, read this article." Anyway, I see this indictment from the US for Virgil Griffith, and I can read in
That's
this
how you
indictment, find out
he
at a
was
party.
indicted.
My girlfriend at the time, we were due to fly to Bali the next day for a holiday. So I find it on my phone and I read this indictment. And I tell you what, Tara, from the beginning, I could see they had, and you know this from your experience, they redact names in these indictments. But and as a lawyer, you understand, as long as you're not totally silly, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out if it's you or not, just because the way they phrase it. Knew it was me, and they were accusing me of organizing this conference, which is really bizarre. I mean, you can't organize something in North Korea because it's North Korea. There's not exactly an event planner that you can call up and go, "Hey."
And could you clarify that the stuff that you were talking about is simply available for everyone online?
Everything is online, and the US government don't even dispute that fact. So anyway, so I leave. So I go through this scenario then, where for the next sort of 3 years of my life, or nearly 3 years, I'm pretty much going through a process where I'm not sure if the FBI are going to indict me or not. I've got a US lawyer, and we're trying to figure out. We're trying to talk to them, but really they keep on saying we're not interested in you. So but the trouble is, it's a bit like, I've said this in other interviews, and I think the best way to describe it, it's like having a sword of Damocles above your head, right? Because you've got no certainty in your life. You can't really settle down. I found it very difficult to run a business correctly, because you're just doing, I guess, the time in mind. You may not be in jail, but you kind of feel that way. So anyway, we fast forward to 2021, or 2020. Hang on, what year are we now? Just trying to think. 2022.
2024.
Sorry, we're 2024. So 2022, and the US authorities eventually, I asked my lawyer to speak to them again, wanted me to go through this thing which they called a proffer agreement, which is where you negotiate. They kind of see if you're truth and whether you could be a witness of some sort for them. In prosecution of Virgil, who still by this time, he's been in and out of jail. He was bailed and then he was put back in again because he tried to access a wallet, a crypto wallet, to pay his legal fees. Absolute mess for the guy. And so we go through this process, and what I realized during this process, Tori, is they've got no interest in justice whatsoever here. All they're interested in is trying to create some kind of PR stunt here, which would land him in jail and would end up with me serving jail time as well. Let's bear in mind that the indictment which they then indicted me on is only applicable to American citizens. It's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and it's designed to hinder Americans from traveling to countries the United States doesn't want them to go to, i.e. North Korea is on that list. I think there's a couple of others. So again, why should I be accused of that? But anyway, we went through this process. And then I realized by the end of this process that they just really had no interest in actually getting to the truth. The truth wasn't actually interesting. To the point they tried to indict me. They gave me a deal, essentially, which I've never spoken about before, which I will now. They gave me a deal where they asked me to admit guilt, not just to violating this act, but also to wire fraud. Now, I mean,
whoa, that's years in prison. That's at least a 15-year sentence.
Yeah. I mean, it can be little or it can be more, but the fact is there was no evidence to substantiate it ever done wire fraud. And the reason I truly believe they wanted to do that, Tara, is because I work in the financial services industry, and it's different if you'd been accused and maybe even served some jail time for violating some obscure sanctions law. But if you're a convicted felon for fraud, you're never going to work ever again. So essentially,
no one's going to trust you, right? Right.
Absolutely. It would run by, because you could explain the other one away most of the time, I think. But you couldn't, you can say, I was young, I was naive, I shouldn't have gone and done this, I didn't realize, but you couldn't ever explain if you're a convicted fraudster. Not just in the financial service industry, I think in general, and in general in your life. I mean, how do you explain that to people you meet? At that time, I wasn't married. I'm married now, thank God. How would you explain that to a future if you were dating again? Hey, yeah, so this, I'm a convicted fraudster. Doesn't go down so well. It's not that sexy. So obviously, tore that deal up, and then I thought, my lawyer was like, look, Chris, they probably can't get you because this law doesn't apply to British citizens. It only applies to American citizens, and the British government have not expressed any interest that you've broken a law in the UK.
Right.
Fast forward February of 2022. Here we go. So I decided I would go to Saudi Arabia to attend this big tech conference. So living in Dubai at the time, it's about an hour and a half's flight to Saudi. And I thought, I'll go there. I've been invited by the Saudi government to attend this big national technology conference called the Leap Conference. They do every year. And every big tech company goes there. All the big CEOs from the world, world's big tech companies go there. So I went there, had an okay time. Wasn't that interesting, to be honest. It wasn't like any of these big tech things. There was, it was a lot of stands with people from multi-billion-dollar companies selling to other companies. But again, interesting to see Saudi. Went back to fly back to Dubai, go up with my passport to the passport control, give it to the lady, and for some reason my passport's not working. Initially, that didn't scare me, Tara, because I traveled a lot. My passport's quite batched up. But it was when I had the British passport. So, now and then they stop you, especially in countries like Saudi or somewhere like that, where it's a little strict on the border control. But no, the lady then took me over to the side, and a Saudi policeman just said to me, "America, very bad." Then I was essentially taken into Saudi jail from that point, and ended up in Saudi fighting. Yeah. Ended up in Saudi.
They said literally that's what they said to you. America, very bad.
They didn't have great English. America, very bad. Oh, and offered me a cigarette, which was very kind of them, actually.
Before they took you to jail. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So what was that moment like emotionally? Like what was going through your head?
Gosh, Tara, I'd always in my head, I decided, and I think this was the fortunate thing, well, maybe the unfortunate but fortunate thing about what they'd done to me, is that I decided in my head that I would already condition myself to be ready for that moment. So obviously you get the butterflies in your stomach and everything, but I was able to really put in place a plan that I'd had in my head the whole time. So I always had my relatives on speed dial, X, Y, Z. So essentially I kept my phone and I started messaging, bam, 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 bam. So everyone would know what they had to do next, in order to deal with the situation. But yeah, it's not nice. Yeah, so that was basically the story, really. 7 months in and out of prison in Saudi, trying to get myself out of the situation. I had a lot of people that I met along the way that were incredibly helpful, including my lawyer there, Dr. Abdullah, and of course the most important person, and I know for you as well, who I had the pleasure to introduce you to, was Reade Sterling, who really, for the second I got myself out of that jail cell, picked up the phone. Within a second, she had me a lawyer, PR, everything. She was running everything, and was and I think still is, for the most part, still in my life, one of my biggest rocks, of someone that really helped me out. So
she's a really good person, and really helps with human rights, international human rights. Yeah, go on. So you're in Saudi jail. So what could you describe a little bit about that? What that's that's different than American jails or other jails.
I mean it's the only one I've got an experience of, I always say to people, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. But obviously it's what you'd expect of a prison in the Middle East. It is quite overcrowded. There's not much to drink, there's not much to eat. And it's a prison at the end of the day. But the one thing I'd say, Tara, is my experience in prison, apart from a few bad experiences, I found that the majority of the time, the people that I was incarcerated with, and for the most part, most of the guards treated me very well. Obviously, it wasn't comfortable. It's one room, 20 to 50 guys in one room with mattresses on the floor, with a couple of showers to share. And maybe they'll let you out to do some exercise for 1 hour a day. It's not particularly nice, but the people in there actually do make it for you, because they help you cope with it, especially if they've been in there for quite some time. Obviously, prison, the Golden Rule of prison, never ask anyone what they were in for. You kind of do after you get to know someone a bit better. But my experience overwhelming is I experienced a great level of support inside prison. In fact, this sounds really weird, but during my time, I'd be in and out. And when I was out of prison, I actually found it less comfortable being inside, because at least inside I had someone to talk to, and some people that in a way could relate to the experience I was going through. So yeah, so that was the process, really. Eventually, after 7 months of the US not providing any evidence to bring to an extradition hearing, 7 whole months, the Saudi government decided to release the arrest warrant on me, release the travel ban, and release and come to a judgment that they had no case in order to judge me on. During the time in which I was going through this, I was preparing as to what I wanted to do next. I knew for a fact that I didn't want to go back to the United Kingdom, where I'm from originally, because I understood. I mean, you cover this a lot in your work, and you know, I'm very, very much engaged in it. You look at Julian Assange. There's no such thing in the UK legal system anymore, such as a fair due process when it comes to extradition to the US. It just doesn't exist, and there are horror stories everywhere. So I just knew that wasn't where I was going to go. Fortunately, I'd spent some time traveling around the CIS region a couple of years before. So I was aware of Russia, aware of Belarus, aware of a lot of these CIS countries. So I decided I was going to go to Russia. So while I was going through this process, I got myself a Russian visa so I'd be able to travel to Russia effectively. But then we also had the risk of, when I was leaving Saudi, how do you get to Russia without going through a third country where the US could try this again? Because Tara, I was then, and I still am, on the Interpol red list, which means whenever you travel through an airport or travel internationally, that's going to flag. And a country, not all countries will obey it, even if they're Interpol members, if the United States do it, but the vast majority of countries will de facto detain you based on that notice on their airport systems. So I had to put the money together. I rang a good friend of mine, and he lent me some money to hire a private jet, of all things. Never been on a private jet all my life. A lot of people think, oh, you had this kind of huge millionaire lifestyle. No, I never took private jets. And I flew on this jet, this Turkish jet, and we flew low over Iraq, over into Dagestan, which is the very south of Russia, in the Caucasus. And I got off this clunky old private jet, and there I was. Here I am in Russia. Landed there, took a commercial flight to Moscow from there. Didn't fly private all the way, and arrived here. Was very, very fortunate that even when I was in Saudi, Russia Today, who I know you work for as well, and I do. At the time I didn't work for them, they really took on my case, especially Donald Porter, who's a friend of ours, who's one of the main presenters at RT.
Good colleague, good friend.
Good friend, good guy. And as soon as as Trump would say, as soon as I got there, RT offered me a job, and I went through the similar process to you. I went and I applied for and successfully received asylum here in Russia. So I am a Russian refugee, just like you. And you know, it's been an amazing experience. I've met you along the way, and so many other interesting people here, and really found a far greater purpose in my life than I had prior to being here. Also, as you know, I got married and had a baby 2 months ago, so it's been quite a journey.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Thank you.
So, baby at that.
So yeah, I sorry I've waffled on a bit, but that's more or less it in a nutshell.
I think that's really good because the media portrays you in a very different light. So this really encapsulates more of your experience, and that's what I really wanted the audience to understand. Just the unfairness of being a British citizen when you really have no relationship with the US at all. I mean, my difficulties with the US, I am an American, and right now, unfortunately, the Biden regime is really targeting American citizens that they consider political enemies or for whatever reason. But in your case, I've been trying to figure out, and one thing maybe you can help me with, because you weren't heavily in the media as crypto. You were. I mean, I know how brilliant you are. I mean, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying you weren't like one of those figures that was in the paparazzi. You weren't like that. Why did the US government, do you think, or was it because of who you were linked to, decide to hone in on you and want to stop whatever you were doing with some of the advancements that we're now seeing with crypto and being used in the way that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's a really great question, Tara. I think, yes, you're right. I really am a no one. I'm still a no one. I actually like
I
being a
didn't mean
no
it
one.
like that. I meant you're, to
No,
me,
no,
you're
no, no,
very
no. But
important. But
in the respect of what you say, you're exactly right.
yeah,
I'm not someone that gives a lot of wanted to give a lot of interviews or wanted the limelight.
right.
Or if you look
Yeah,
online prior to this all blowing up, really there wasn't much there. There's some stuff when I was younger and I was I was a theatre major and did a few plays and stuff, and there's a bit like that. But it's kind of quiet after that, apart from a few business dealings, but very much just in the business space. Really, Tara, I think it had to do with poor Virgil Griffith. I mean, Virgil had challenged the United States government on various occasions before this. He built something called Wikiscanner, which was a product he built pre-crypto, which was trying to assist in proving fake news and proving when the United States government, particularly, and other state actors, would use Wikipedia to edit articles and to show that transparently to people. He'd, and if you ever meet Virgil, maybe one day Virgil, well, please God, he'll be out of jail soon, and maybe he'll be comfortable to come on here, and you'll see the kind of character he is. He's a very quirky and provocative person, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in mostly the positive way. He likes to challenge the status quo, which is why he built something as amazing as Ethereum, which is now a cryptocurrency changing the entire way in which transactions happen
yes.
globally. It's been adopted by more or less every single major corporation in the world as well. It's not just
So do
a
you
crazy
think
thing.
this is part of that whole cabal that wants to keep everything under the centralized banking system and squash anyone who's successful with crypto? Because you're kind of considered the OG of crypto. So what is your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, Tara, I think you said it in one. That's exactly what it's about. They let they ignored cryptocurrency as a bit of a weird thing that they thought was just used by drug dealers for such a long
Right.
time to move money, and then they found other states, other actors within this world have started to use cryptocurrency for payments, and they saw this whole adoption that organically grew with no government actually organically grew of average people like you and me getting involved in this industry, getting involved in the communities around it. Just to explain to people who maybe aren't familiar with crypto, there are a lot of different communities of different people building really interesting things. It's essentially like the internet was at the beginning until they really cut down and tried to curtail and destroy that by creating these massive commercial conglomerates like the Googles and the Apples of the world, which essentially stifled off any real innovation in terms of hardware and a lot of software development. You had to have a lot of money to start building software. Cryptocurrencies got rid of that. This was started by people who basically didn't have, excuse my French, didn't have a pot to piss in, who overnight became, really billionaires. We're talking, Tara. We're talking normal guys in their bedroom that figure out how this magic money works and then become billionaires. And I mean, Washington D.C. far better than me, but I imagine there is nothing that pisses them off more than that.
Yes. Yes, they don't like because money can get you power, as we know.
Exactly.
And exactly right. And you have taken a lot of other people under your wing that have been out and about and dealing with this. And I don't talk about other people's cases, of course, per name, but there are other people from America, from the Great Britain, from different parts of Europe that are now seeking shelter in Russia. And I don't know. I mean, to me, it's remarkable. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean,
That are seeking asylum.
yeah, yeah, Tara. I mean, it's astounding, really, the cases that you see and I see that come through us just by the fact of our profiles. It's astounding. I mean, the things that people are being accused of now are just, well, let's just be honest, they're not illegal. You've got everything from a
Right.
journalist giving his or her point of view, right?
Right.
Which I thought in the Western world, but particularly in the United States, was enshrined in the United States Constitution. You may be able to say something that is horrifically, and I'm not saying these people are, but just giving an example that I would apply it to. Like, you can have someone say something horrifically racist. You can say, we're both Irish. You can say someone says, oh, I hate all Irish people. Well,
Right.
you and I don't turn around and say, you can't write that. You can write that. You can say that. That is your right. There's a point of might punch you in the face for saying it, but you can say it. It's legal. But we've got a lot of people like that come over. We've got a lot of very smart technologists that come to my door a lot of the time, and these are guys that for whatever reason have ended up on the wrong side of the US legal system, be that for crypto, which the US gave hardly any regulatory clarity on crypto for a decade. So the fact, and the biggest problem you've got in the United States particularly, but it's happening all over, even seeing people from the UK with the same problem. But in the United States is you can't do this in the UK, but you can retroactively prosecute someone. I.e., if the United States decides today that it's illegal, if it wasn't illegal 10 years ago, they can still indict you for it, which is absolutely bizarre. Yeah, absolutely.
That is bonkers.
Yeah, so there's lots of people I get to some that, you know, and you get, as you know, we get that there are some people that genuinely have a case, and there are a lot of people that maybe have drunk the Kool-Aid a bit too much. But the people with the cases, a lot of the time they'll call me up. They're so scared. They're talking to me like, you know, with a voice masker, so they're even scared of me. And the one sort of takeaway I always have for them is, if you got a real case, look, I've been there. I know what it's like, and I'll do. And you know, you say I help a lot of people, but sorry, I mean, I don't consider it something I'm doing sort of out of a public service. It's just something because I know what that's like, and you know, people help me, so then it's my job to pay it forward, right?
Yes,
so,
yes.
So
and we both try to help people as best we can.
Yeah,
that's a good way to
as
look
best
at
we
it.
can.
Yeah.
But
as
yeah,
best
back to
we can.
Yeah, as best we can. But
I want to go back to crypto for a second, and not to put you on the spot, but because if you don't know this, you know, I'm sorry I'm asking, but just recently there was a difference in the way Biden talked about crypto and Trump talked about crypto, and someone posted from the crypto world and said, oh, you know, now Biden has lost because Trump is supporting crypto and whatever, and on, you know, that kind of thing, and Biden is not. He wants to criminalize it, he wants it centralized, he wants to control it and regulate it. So did you hear about that too? Do you know anything about that, and can you comment on it?
I know a little bit about it. So obviously one of the people that's very close to Donald Trump is a man called Steve Bannon, who a lot of people might be familiar with. So Steve has been a massive advocate of cryptocurrencies more or less since their inception. And I think he's really been that driving force to get Donald Trump and his team to understand actually the opportunities that cryptocurrency brings. Look, I think the US, I think, you know, Donald Trump is a businessman. He's aware. He's also been involved in a number of crypto projects himself. He launched his own NFT collection recently, so he's also made money from crypto. But I think it goes back to the and did very well off it, I'm told. But it goes back to the point of, and I'm not American, but I can just see as someone outside, what does it actually fundamentally, in my view, growing up and admiring many of the United States, mean to be American? It means that you can. It means you believe in a free market, right? You believe in that if I want to pay in greenback dollars, or you as a store owner want to take chocolate bars from me, that's your right under the US Constitution. So you can't ban an entire currency, and you can't ban people paying in it and receiving it. So I think Trump understands that, but he also understands the one fundamental thing which Biden fails to understand. Crypto has generated a huge amount of wealth, a huge amount of multimillionaires, even billionaires. And the best thing for the United States, with an economy crumbling, you know, look at the biggest success story of the United States would be the tech revolution in Silicon Valley. This is the new Silicon Valley, and I think Trump understands that the United States should be encouraging that innovation, not throwing everyone in jail, but putting
under the bus.
putting up the right guardrails, which is what I always argued for. And I fell on the wrong side because there were no guardrails that I was talking about in crypto in all these speeches for years, putting up the guardrails that says, look, you should be free to build and innovate and create things and make mistakes. But these are just the core tenets or principles that you need to follow in order to make sure that you don't make those mistakes and that you stay out of jail. So I think his policy is correct, and I think he is pro crypto, and thank God for that. Hopefully he wins the election and this madness will stop.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. Well, I do understand. Biden's position is simply to control it and regulate it, as we said. They don't want people having their own autonomy financially. And it's interesting how the libertarians and the Republicans, libertarians means, and this is the thing, in Great Britain, Republicans and Democrats are a little bit different in their meaning than they are in America. And you know that because you're kind of sophisticated with your geopolitical knowledge, but a lot of people don't know that. But there really is, libertarians in America generally believe they don't want, you know, government involvement in anything. They just want freedom. They they believe in local government having if very little. They don't believe in regulations and permits and all the oversight of government. And really sometimes even look at the Constitution on its face, which there's arguments about that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the Constitution is old and it needs to be, but there's some basic rights that are being violated right now. Our First Amendment, which you referred to, which is freedom of speech in the U.S., and our Fourth Amendment, which is right to privacy. And so let's talk, because you're starting to talk about Trump. I wanted your opinion about just the weaponization of the DOJ and FBI. Everyone, my audience that's watching right now knows my case very well. And if not, then they need to just look it up. And in your case too, there was, in my opinion, a legal overreach to try to, that's how the term of art we would use. It's a legal overreach trying to extradite you, as with Julian Assange that they're doing now. So I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. And I was in politics when I was very young. And I've never seen a weaponization on American citizens, on its own citizens, and European citizens like it is right now. What is your opinion of this weaponization by the FBI, DOJ? Do you think it's going to continue in the crypto world against some of the people that you know, or do you think that there is going to be a shift? Is there an awakening against this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Tara. I think, well, as you know, being having gone to law school, all justice, and this experience really explained it to me more. All justice is selective, right? It's always selective, right? You have, especially the way in which the US court system is built, where you have these federal district attorneys, AUSAs, assistant US attorneys, that essentially they've got so much of a workload of silly things that they're going to prosecute for. They have to basically pick a target and then hit it, right? That's just how it works, which is flawed in itself endemically. But putting that aside, I think what Biden has managed to do, and it's quite amazing how quickly he managed to do this over I know there was a whole lot with Obama where this work was happening, but under his tenure as president, which, let's be honest, is coming up to just 4 years, he's managed to build within the DOJ these things he calls task forces. Now, what does a task force mean? Well, if we look at the evidence of what these task forces mean, he set up a task force for January 6th. He set up a task force just for President Trump. He set up a task force just for crypto. And we could be here all day going through these different task forces. But as you know, all this means is what he's doing is he's basically interfering in the legal process. He's basically getting a load of these very young AUSAs. Usually they're young and they've all got things to prove because they spend, 4 or 5 years upwards in the working for the government, and then they go out and make $1 million a year as a partner in some big legal firm to get people like me and you off because they've got friends inside the department. That's basically how it works. Is that? I saw it with my own eyes. I engaged a lawyer and saw how it all worked. But what he's done is basically create these basically creating basically an arsenal of weapons and targeting them at his enemies. It's people he disagrees with. They're not. It's not like Nixon setting up a war on drugs task force, or I think it was Nixon that did. That's completely different. Again, ineffective, we could say. All task forces are ineffective, and they always end up targeting the wrong people because you'll go for the lowest hanging fruit if you're an AUSA. You want to get conviction, get as many on your notches on your bedpost as you can, right? Before you can. That's how it works. But what he's done is he's just weaponized that whole system for himself, using real guns, but actually very specifically targeted guns at people. And they've taken down people that would never before have been interesting. Most of these people, if we look at the crypto side, pretty much none of the people that they've indicted, apart from Sam Bankman-Fried, which, by the way, they had no choice, who was their guy, who was actually advising them on their crypto task force before they had to prosecute him. Any of the other people, like give you an example, a guy called Arthur Hayes, who was the first real self-made Black billionaire in my generation, right? Not someone that was built a business in Hong Kong before there was any regulation, that then they decided they were going to put in jail. Obviously, he had a good attorney. He played the game. He walked the walk, talked the talk, came out with a very sizable fine of $200 million. People like him, people really like my old boss, who's just been put, who's currently now fighting extradition in the United States, Roger Ver, who people don't know. Roger has been a very big influence on my life, a very kind person, in spite of what the media writes about him, similar to what you're saying before, who gave up his US citizenship a decade ago. And suddenly, a few days really, or hardly any time to it, till the statute of limitations runs out on it, the US indict him with tax fraud. Now, which is a crazy, silly case, right? Like Roger, we can speculate how much Roger's worth, and it's not about the money. But Roger, I'm pretty sure. I don't know for a fact. We never discuss money; it's vulgar. I'm pretty sure he's a double-digit billionaire. They're saying that he failed to declare $50 million in taxes. Well, I'm sorry, Tara, for me and you, $50 million is a lot of money. But for a double-digit billionaire, it's like me and you missing off a digit on when we're filing our taxes. The IRS don't cut, well, they probably would to you, but the IRS don't, for most people, go, you're going to go to jail for that. They'll ask you, sorry, I think you've made a mistake, and you'll rectify it and you'll pay the fine. But that's the situation I think we're in. It's very scary. And I think, but the biggest problem is, I think if Trump doesn't win the next election, it's going to drive all innovation away from the United States rather than toward it. All of the work that has been done in the United States over the last 30 years of the tech revolution, of Silicon Valley, of every single entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur specifically, wanting to get a green card and wanting to establish their business in the United States, I think that's gone now. And I don't know how they're going to get it back.
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to prosecute them and regulate them that way, I mean, now they're going after Elon Musk for financial, stuff, and they're looking, and he's having to fight his battles. However, he does have that edge with, he's very embedded with NASA and doing those kinds of things. So maybe that relationship will keep him from being, singled out. But they're not going after Mark Zuckerberg. They're not going after, like they had those hearings and brought him in, but it was like blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, it's just a show. It was a show trial. There was nothing of substance there.
It wasn't real.
Yeah, and Tara, you mentioned Zuckerberg. Let's look at Facebook, right? How many criminal violations do we think? Obviously, I have no evidence. I won't get sued by Facebook, but my opinions are my own and all that. But then there must have been criminal things that Facebook has done over the years that they've managed to do certain deals on.
Has been proven is the child sexual trafficking. They were doing nothing to protect children on Facebook. And,
sure. And Tara, in defense of Facebook, which probably a lot of people don't do, but I'm just saying this in defense of new innovative technologies. There are times when they do stray outside of the law, just because when you're building, and I've been in those scenarios, when you're building a new company with exciting new things, the only way you do it is by pushing boundaries. And sometimes you push too much. And, you're saying a regulation. I believe regulation does need to exist, but it has to be sensible. It has to be principled based. So basically it has to say, if you're building a tech platform, no child porn, safeguarding of children, safeguarding of free speech should be in there, in my opinion, as well. And all of these different things, but not absolute obscure laws with file this form, fill in this AB1C3 form every time you do this, because then you just kill innovation, and also you scare people, and also you put some of the brightest people in the world in prison, and that's not where you want them. You need them outside building things.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that. Did you ever get approached? Because it seems to me, as an American official, they would have been more interested in your brain than putting you away. Did you ever get approached to work with them?
I was never approached by the CIA or anything like that, because Tara, I don't think that's how they think anymore. And I think that also shows their ineffectiveness to combat terrorism, to combat all these things. If I like spy novels, but if you ever read like novels of old spies, to me, when they were speaking about these things, in these old books, it seemed like they would find someone that was quite intelligent that may have strayed across the law and brought them in. Not in my case, and certainly not in the case of anyone that I've ever met in this scenario and in crypto. I think that nowadays they're not interested in listening and learning. They're just interested in putting people in jail because they're scared. They'd rather not do the work of learning something new, rather than just putting people in jail, which has now caused a huge problem globally when it comes to cryptocurrencies, because they put so many people in jail, like Ross Ulbricht, who founded the Silk Road, right? This is a kid who built a website on his laptop that got a full life sentence in the US. I mean, imagine if they'd gone to Ross and gone, "You're that smart. You built this. You managed to track get all these criminals into this criminal enterprise network that's being used around the world." Instead of us shutting Silk Road down, well, you know, in my opinion, if I were the US government, I would have recruited him, said, "Keep running that website and let's catch as many as possible together. Here's your deal." But no, that's not how they work, Tara. I don't think that's. I think they're so on their knees, and I think, like you said, they've been.
U.S. elements that are participating in those criminal activities. That's why. That's my.
Yeah, that's also very much the case. So, you know, we've got evidence of that for tons. I mean, you had a guy on your show, Victor Boot, recently, that was essentially used by a DEA sting, regardless of him actually really being any sort of criminal. There's no evidence he ever was. But the fact is, in my opinion, he was probably treading too much on their turf, and they didn't like that because they're the ones that, you know, as soon as you get too close to seeing the illegal stuff that they get up to, they take you out. And you know, probably maybe in my case, I strayed too close to something that someone was doing that I don't know about, and that was the reason why they wanted to get me. Who knows?
Amazing. You know, you've had an amazing life for such a young person, because you are quite young, and always a bit of a maverick. Do you feel like constrained now because of the things that have happened to you, or do you feel a new sense of freedom?
No, Tara, I actually feel the opposite. I do feel a sense of freedom. So here in Russia, I'm very fortunate. Russia is there's so many interesting new technical innovations happening in this country, and I've been really fortunate to, and I'm very grateful to have been embraced here. You know, if we look at Russia, adopting the digital ruble. Russia is now just passed. President Putin passed into law a new law allowing for cryptocurrency payments to be used to settle international, not local, but international trade, which was a big thing. And just to be a part of that conversation, I'm not there in any big way or on any sort of high level, but to be asked in my opinion by people is really, really nice. And then, yeah, just going around my daily life, doing what I've always done, which is doing a lot of different deals, working on different projects, hustling around like I like to do. I don't feel constrained at all. And I've because I don't feel constrained anymore, it's really interesting because I'm getting to work with people all over the world. You know, I'm doing a lot of work in Africa right now. Sat here in Moscow, I can't leave Russia, but I'm working more than I have ever before in new countries, specifically in Africa at the moment, and some work in Asia. And starting to work on really interesting new ways of applying financial transactions to the world that don't involve the US, which is really, really interesting. Really, really, it's challenging, which I like. But yeah, no, there's none of that for me. It's full game on here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know, we came at a time right after the military operation. Both of us, you know, came in 2023. And there's was sanctions in Russia, but we haven't seen the results of those. We've talked about how abundant everything is in Russia, and beautiful, actually. What was one of the biggest myths that got busted for you? Because you came from Great Britain. In America, we had our own myths about Russia, right? But what was the biggest surprise for you when you came to Moscow and started living, actually like digging and living?
Yeah. It's a really great question. I think for me, it was always this idea that I think it was too that first that Russia is some kind of political autocracy that's run by Vladimir Putin, who's some kind of benevolent at times or ruthless dictator that if you disagree with him, you know, he'll take you out. Well, that's absolutely not true. You and I both know that. There's plenty of opposition politics here. There's plenty of people when you go out for a drink or whatever that will give a very different political opinion, which isn't an illegal thing, which is absolutely fine, which they are happy to voice and challenge politically. They can stand for election. There are other political parties in Russia. I think there's that one, and there was the other myth that I heard that like Russian pensioners are all starving. Well, that's not true at all. I mean, you know, and now I have a Russian family. You know, my Russian family has a number of pensioners in, and they get by fine. They get far more than pensioners do, I believe, in the UK and probably in the US. They get far more. They get free bus pass, free travel, free housing, free heating, free water, free healthcare. Right. So these are all myths that really those are the ones that struck me the most. But there are hundreds, right, that you hear all the time. But for those two, for me, were the ones that, you know, I really got answered very quickly when I got here.
Well, it really is a great standard of living. And I know people one of the things that people come at us about is, well, you're just in Moscow, so you don't know. Well, as you know, right now I'm broadcasting from the Caucasus, and
Yeah.
I'm in a yurt, so that's why kind of the wonkiness of my camera and everything, because I don't have my full setup with me right now. But so forgive me, and you can hear a cow in the background who's very upset about
Lovely.
something. I don't know if it came through the recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm literally next to a field of cows and out in the rural fields. And I went to a store and filmed, which my producer's going to have up for everyone to see. I mean, you could get anything you wanted at this little small town store. It was filled to the brim. It even
Nice.
had caviar chips.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, it's very abundant here. The people around here, I just had a big tour today of the Caucasus, of some of the small towns, and went up into the mountains. And the people are so happy and relaxed, and they talk to me about their life. And the cows are walking on the road, and the horses are walking.
Amazing.
Sheep everywhere, and it's much quieter pace than Moscow. But I mean, the housing is beautiful. The houses and farms are lovely. So I took a lot of photos into that. So for me, that was a big myth. Like everyone said, oh, there's so much poverty. So you're right. It was.
It's rubbish, Tara. I mean,
thinking it's the 1990s, and
sure.
we've here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I travel extensively around this country from everywhere. Ulyanovsk, which is a small region, about an hour and a half flights to Moscow, Saratov, Vladivostok, where I went with you, actually, Kaliningrad, where my wife's from, Irkutsk in Siberia. And I tell you what, Tara, across the vast way, compare this to, I'll give you a UK standard, right? If I drive an hour and a half, if I drive even within London, if I drive an hour and a half outside London, I can take you to somewhere 100 million times worse than anything I've ever seen in Russia. And I'm not sugarcoating it because, me and you, some sort of propagandist. I encourage people to get a visa, come here and see for yourself. Disprove that myth for yourself. Because these places are lovely, and there's plenty of food in the shops, and also I think, Tara, as you attested to there, the people are so nice. Russian people are just so lovely. I've never felt in any way, shape, or form unwelcome in this country, and I can tell you for what, I couldn't say the same about my own. I think if a Russian person moved to the UK right now, they'd be made to feel very unwelcome. And the Russians are,
yeah. As you know, I said, oh, of course, I want to live here now. Wherever I go in Russia, in the town, I'm always like text you and be like, I think I want to live here.
Yeah, another place. One day you'll find your true home.
I don't know if I want to live anywhere for very long. I love to experience new things. I'm an explorer, gypsy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm happier in a yurt. I don't know what it is, but I guess being on a tent, being near a horse, I get my head about. But I do love Moscow. What do you love about Moscow?
I love Moscow too. But I get your point. This I always say, when people come to Russia, they usually go and they see Moscow and St. Petersburg. But there's just so much more that again, amazing cities, but there is so much more that this country offers. I think this country in terms, I always say the landscape is so similar to the United States, in the fact, in the United States you can go skiing, you can go sunbathing, you can go white water rapid rafting, whatever, and you can do the same in Russia, exactly the same.
Yeah, very similar. In fact, when I was sending out videos, people were saying, this looks like California, this looks like Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, and the UK has its own beauty and austereness as well. I mean, all these countries that we talk about are beautiful in their own way. But what the difference is that the leadership here in Russia cares about the people. And I think that's, and I'm not trying to make this as a propaganda statement, it's just an observation as someone who's been in
absolutely
politics. We don't have representatives in the US that care about the people themselves. They don't care. They're enriching themselves. Here, there's a real cultural unity, pride, and even though people are like different religions, like they were showing me today the Muslim church right next to the Russian Orthodox, and how they were across from each other, the mosque from the church.
Yeah,
that's really touching, and the people just milling about, getting along, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the US has a lot to learn. And I know Great Britain is a little bit better than the US about that.
Oh no, Tara, I would disagree with you entirely. I think the country's lost its entire. I think the point you're making is really rings very true. I think what Russia has preserved, and really what the Russian government uh, in wants to preserve and has successfully managed to preserve within the people, but it's the people themselves, they elect the government, is this idea of a Russian value. And that is a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, religiously diverse, and really that, but it's is ingrained with these common values. I mean, these are the values that I grew up with through my grandparents. They're not alien values to the West. They've been eroded, but they're not alien. The values of they probably call me in the US sexist for saying this, but if a lady is gets on the train or the bus and I'm a man, I stand up and I give her my seat. If I get out of the car, I go and open the door for her. I know that sounds really juvenile, but it starts there and it goes up to every.
It's just polite. I like that.
Yeah, but you will always see people in Russia behave that way because they've maintained this sense of moral decency that you can have all the money in the world and all the power in the world, and we can all want to get somewhere fast. But at the end of the day, if we do not look after each other and look after our own communities and support each other, then what's it all for? There's absolutely no point to any of it.
Cool. So this leads me to my final question. And that is because you're kind of in the midst of working, doing work with our team, doing your own work, doing things. So how do you see England, Great Britain, and America fitting into the multipolar world, or are they missing the boat?
Tara, I think it's going to be a long time before they're even going to be allowed to ask to come into it. I think that train is well and truly started. It's an express train and it's going there. We saw the example of when Blinken went to see President Xi versus when President Putin went there, like maybe a week or so, a couple of weeks was it, or but I forget the time apart. China and Russia, these two. We're forgetting the size of these countries, Tara, just on their own, China and Russia, right? These two countries that the West has decided to ostracize and attack have now come together and gone, no, we're not going to have that. These are, the two now actually, hilariously, but it's true. Russia is a really fast growing economy thanks to the Western sanctions. And China obviously is outpacing everyone and has done for the last, since Nixon's China policy that permitted them the West to buy all their goods from China. These countries are now driving forward this power. And then you've got other countries, old colonial countries like India, for example, right? Those countries are going to come together. Do we honestly think the Indian government want the British government sat at a table they run anymore? They were subjugated for hundreds of years by the British government. It's not going to happen. And I think the biggest mistake the British government has made has been by alienating what at one point, I remember being in London as in my 1920, when Russians were being welcomed. They were bringing so much money, Chinese as well. And the government at the time, the British government at the time, the Cameron Osborne government, had a policy which was the golden age of relations between Britain and China. They were ignoring the US policy. And by going and basically becoming a nodding dog to the US, I think that they've done irreparable damage to the UK. I think it used to be a fact, where there's always that joke, isn't there, of guys in the US mail ordering Russian brides. I think very soon Russian men will be. Well, I don't think they really want to mail order British brides or American brides. They've got very pretty ladies here, but you get my point. I think the world is going to change now. The affluence is going to be here, and unfortunately, the countries that you and I hail from, Tara, are going to be very poor. And unfortunately, the people of these countries are going to suffer in a way that I don't think not since the Great Depression, which is a generation that you and I may remember just from relatives that we met when we were incredibly young. But they will experience that kind of level of poverty, just as the Chinese and the Indians have for so many generations. It's going to flip on its head now, in my opinion.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. So thank you so much for joining me and, on this wonderful podcast from the Caucasus and you're in Moscow.
Yeah.
So sorry you didn't get to see Minerali Volody. How do you say it?
Next time. I've been there before with you actually, and it was really lovely. Yes, so we'll have to make a trip again down there soon when we've got a little less work on and can get some time.
That's for sure. That's for darn sure. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again for joining me. And to everyone who's watching, my book just came out in Russian and has made it to the warehouse. So it's going to be released into the bookstores next week. So anyone out there in the West that speaks Russian, you'll be able to see it. I will be
Bye-bye.
self-published version of it, and I will be doing the presentation. So I'll be putting that all online, and you'll see bits of it probably next show. So thanks everyone for joining me,
Right.
and we will see you next time. Baka baka.
Baka